Do you see I think one of the big questions there is how, you're changing their ability to be viable. How do you feel like these standards, these sort of externally enforced standards, might be changing?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is that, we can't be what we can't see. And when there are more candidates, more women elected to office, it makes it so that the next woman behind them seems like a candidate that could get elected. I think that we are changing that across the country. The Nevada state legislature is now a majority women. And we're being able to watch these new people rise, run, and question the fact that maybe having the most money in the bank account isn't necessarily the only thing that's going to guarantee their election.
Awesome. We can follow up more on that with everyone. Sarah, I was hoping you could also take us through a candidate story that really shows the work that you all are doing and what's important to you guys at Ignite.
Yeah. So I'm going to share a little bit about Jocelyn Yao. I met Jocelyn when she was a sophomore or a senior, I can't remember what year, at UC Berkeley, and she was majoring in politics. She was born in Hong Kong, and when her family immigrated to the United States, they moved to the Inland Empire in California. And for those of you who are not from California or know much about the Inland Empire, it is heavily Republican, and the wealth disparity is quite huge in terms of the gap. And Jocelyn, when I met her, was really excited about politics. She had done a couple different internships, ultimately took a job in Congresswoman, or now Speaker Pelosi's office, and then after graduating, moved back to the Inland Empire in the city of Eastvale and put her name on the ticket for 2018. She knocked on doors, she raised a lot of money, she went to the breakfasts, she went to the lunches, the dinners, and the happy hours, and all sorts of everything in between to get to as many voters as she could. And she kind of did a little bit of the AOC effect in the sense of what we're dubbing in the young people world of the AOC effect of not looking at just people who voted in the last election, but looking at the people who were never registered and people who just hadn't been turning out in a couple years. And those were the doors she knocked on, and those were the individuals that she got to. Jocelyn, excitedly enough, won her election in 2018 and is the only woman of color serving in the city council, and is probably the gap between her and the next city council person is about 30 years. And so she is really emblematic of everything that we do at Ignite in terms of taking the resources, the training that we provide, leveraging her Ignite network. There were a lot of her sisters that pounded the pavement for her, that door knocked, and I made lots of phone calls on her behalf to get her to the finish line, and now is serving, and like I said, is just the first in so many ways. And a lot of the challenges she faces is because she looks young, she is young, and what does that mean in terms of experience, and what does that mean in terms of what she has to offer the city. And so now that she's there, there's a lot to prove, and she is working at it every single day.
And what would you say her biggest needs were that you all were able to help support, or in general, as from that position, what do you think the biggest obstacles or needs that she came into that campaign with?
I mean, always money, right? When you're the newest candidate, it's always dollar bills. But I think the biggest piece that I think the core of Ignite and the core of our community at Ignite is the ability to keep going, and the ability that you have this Girl Squad and this national support network of young women from like 12 years old to like 30 years old that are rooting you on, and that constant like text message or like phone call, and having that particular support network was, I think, the most critical piece that really got her through, and is really what supports her now in getting through all of the different pieces of, well, you worked for Nancy Pelosi, so you feel this, but that's not necessarily how she feels or how she's going to act in terms of legislation.
Yeah. Everyone's favorite, what was the story of the 4 women candidates who just had a text chain that like kept them going through the entire thing? And that was like one of the solid pieces. I think many of us can probably relate. I want to open up a little bit of the question around the sort of next generation, and a little bit on that sort of viability question to all of you. Obviously, every organization can't work with every single candidate out there. You're all having to make difficult, I mean, NDCT is open to everyone, of course, but especially the organizations with limited resources, you all have to make tough decisions about which candidates you're supporting. And so similar to the question I mentioned to Sarah, but also, of course, Sarah, jump in, I wanted to just open it up to see, from organizational standpoint, how do you think that those standards are changing, or how potentially are your organizations thinking about that kind of viability question of like who makes sense for you to support, who is a potentially winning candidate, and also are you thinking about taking in candidates in supporting candidates you know are not going to win, and how does that fit into the strategies you all put forward?
So I'll start really quickly because we can't. Jocelyn's a success story for us, but we start at kindergarten at 5 years old, and so we start with building political ambition and nurturing that, and getting young women in particular in these spaces, training them, introducing them to elected leaders, and then building the support network. And so when they are getting older, and we're turning 10 this year, so finally our students are like at the age of actually running for office, but we're in it for the long game. It's a marathon for us, and so once we get there, then we hand them over to all of these other organizations to keep them going.
Yeah, I think for us, one thing that we're always looking for, we have a C3 that does training for queer people who want to run for office, but we're seeing a lot of other entities pop up that are doing candidate campaign trainings. And so when we're looking at a candidate, if they have that, and they might not have as much money in their account, we know that they've got a good base that they're building a campaign plan off of. And we're able to look at that and figure that out. And I think that for taking risk, we definitely do this. It was 2 years ago, 2 years ago in 2017, I saw an application on my desk. It was for this trans woman who was running against 3 straight guys in a district to compete against a 24-year incumbent who was the biggest bigot in almost the country, but definitely Virginia. And her name was Danica Rome. And, we said, this is a huge opportunity. She's doing the work. She had done our training. She had done, I think, PCCC's training and Emerge. And so she was like trained up, and she was actualizing that on the ground. And we saw that, and we said, win or lose, this is exactly the kind of candidate we want. And then she won that primary, and then she kicked butt and won that general. And now she's inspiring a ton of other trans folks to step up and run across the country. And so that risk has turned into a huge reward, and we're getting a more representative government from it.
And for NDTC, we really are part of our ecosystem. So we make sure that as we identify folks who are coming through our training, either in person or in our online academy, that we're able to identify what are their interests, what are their communities that they're part of, and how do we actually connect them to some of these wonderful organizations that we're up here with today to get the deeper resources that they may need. And we've been able to find a lot of folks and encourage a lot of people to run for office. We had nearly 900 NDTC trained folks who ran for office in 2018 up and down the ballot. So we're really helping to make sure that we're identifying those folks, cultivating their skill set, and connecting them to those organizations that can then carry them across the finish line, and really ensure that as we operate as a coalition with one shared goal, that we each understand what piece of the pie that we have and how we're better connecting those pieces to make sure that we really are serving that one shared goal.
Building off everything that has been set up here, Sarah said at the beginning, we're in it for the long game. Yes, 2019, 2020, these are crucial elections, but 2028, 2040, and 2050 will be critical elections as well. We want to make sure that we are part of this training and building out candidates that are strong, who maybe are starting in a city council seat in the Inland Empire, who are going to go on to be the governor of California. We want to make sure we're building those leaders now, which for us means taking huge risks. We've supported candidates in districts where we were told, there is literally no way this candidate can win. They're not going to get the votes. It's a deep red area. And we've watched those people run for office and flip seats in Oklahoma, win seats in Kansas, and we're really excited for those future leaders.
Awesome. All right, we have a couple minutes left. I'm going to do my final and favorite question. one of my favorite things about this panel, and I think a lot of things about what we're seeing at the conference today, is that everybody has different pieces of the infrastructure and has different pieces of the pie. And I would say, sort of as my editorialization, it seems like, 2017 was a year of tremendous opportunity and interest, and 18 we really had to focus on the election, and it's seeming like this year, it's feeling a lot like, at least from my perspective, that we're seeing a lot of that collaboration and cooperation across organizations and sort of taking this time to breathe to find those connections. And so the question I would ask is sort of who else is a critical piece of the infrastructure that you all are seeing, who you rely on as partners? Like maybe who else should be on this stage? What other organizations, what other programs are you really excited about that we're not seeing up here? I'm gonna start with Sarah.
So the other organization that came to mind after she asked me this question earlier is She the People. I don't know if folks have heard about it. Yes. Amy Allison is a dear friend of Ignites and of myself. Today they're hosting a presidential forum in Houston, Texas for over 1,000 folks, 1,000 women, and really uplifting what does it mean to have women of color as part of the larger conversation, and what do these presidential candidates think about that? And so I think they're really important to us at Ignite, and important to me particularly, of opening the doors and the opportunities for women of color and increasing our representation up and down the ballot.
I think stakeholders on the ground, whether it be state parties, local chapters of national groups, they're the ones who need to be paid attention to, certainly in some of this tough turf. We've never elected a queer person to the Mississippi State Legislature. That might not be surprising. Mississippi's a very conservative state. But as we're trying to do that this year, we're realizing that no one has done any work in Mississippi in a really long time. The data is terrible. The Democrats are demoralized. It's pretty upsetting. And I think the people on the ground are important to talk to, because they've helped us find a great candidate. They've helped us find avenues that we can take. But I think collectively, as so many of us are starting to focus in all 50 states, those partners are really pivotal to help regrow, plant those seeds, so we can be successful down the line.
So I'll quickly share that I think one of the things I'm most excited about when thinking about partners who are a part of this ecosystem, but not always part of the conversations, is our grassroots organizations. Folks like our labor unions, like women's organizations, like local community groups. When we're looking for those new leaders to actually cultivate and encourage to run for office, that's where we're finding them. That's where they're getting politically motivated. And organizing is a transformational experience, and those folks are doing that work. And the more we build the bridge, where we're taking folks from issue advocacy into electoral advocacy, into running for office, the stronger we will be across the board.
Again, I agree with everything that has been said here. I also want to add, one of the things that I'm really excited about is we're starting to look to our alumni and alumni of other partner groups and reaching out to them and saying, hey, what seats are open in your community, and who is someone that you worked with on your campaign that you actually think should run for office? And starting to build recruitment programs that are local, that touch into grassroots organizations, and take those leaders and empower them to actually step up and run themselves.
Awesome. Love all of these answers, agree. And thank you guys so much. This is wonderful. Thanks so much.